You may remember we're starting a new experiment of having a gathering song to gather ourselves in before our board gives us our welcome for the morning. So I would like to invite you to sing after me. It goes like this. When you arrive, we all arrive. So come on in. Let's begin. This place awaits. The love you bring. So welcome home. And let us sing. Beautiful, thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm Ruth Millage, a member of our Board of Trustees, and I welcome you to this Sunday service at the UU Church of Columbia. I'm a short white woman with short white hair, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck. We are a congregation of many beliefs, striving together to embody courageous love, radical welcome, and deep connection. And we're so glad you're here. Whether in the sanctuary or on our live stream, welcome. We'd particularly like to welcome any visitors among us this morning and invite you to sign our Visitors Connect book in the greeting area, the Zoom chat, or the QR code in your order of service. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Children and babies are always welcome in worship, and we have nursery care in the lower level for our youngest ones, as well as a lively children's program for all ages. Today, we're staying together as one community of all ages for our service. Children's program will resume next week. Now, let us settle into this time and place together with a musical offering from our own UU band.
Good morning, my name is Sam Buffalo, and in just a moment I'm going to be sitting on a box drum called a cajon. I'm wearing a dark blue plaid shirt. Alan Arnold is with me, he'll be playing the saxophone, and then Sam Otten is behind me. He will be playing the piano, and this is a groove that Sam wrote. Enjoy.
Thank you, band. What a grooving groove. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Dr. Molly Housh Gordon, the minister of this congregation. I am delighted to see you all this morning. I want to thank all the volunteers who helped make church happen last week while I was home with the flu. And I hope you'll excuse my voice is still not quite fully back to its full power, so listen carefully. I am a white woman with red hair that's very long on one side and very short on the other, and today I'm wearing a blue blouse with a teal blazer. And our opening words are by the poet David White. Sometimes if you move carefully through the forest, breathing, like the ones in the old stories, who could cross a shimmering bed of dry leaves without a sound, you come to a place whose only task is to trouble you with tiny but frightening requests, conceived out of nowhere, but in this place, beginning to lead everywhere. Requests to stop what you are doing right now and to stop what you are becoming while you do it. Questions that can make or unmake a life. Questions that have patiently waited for you. Questions that have no right to go away. This morning, as folks from all over the country and world gather in Columbia to celebrate documentary film at the True False Film Festival, we here share an annual service that many Unitarian Universalist congregations practice across the country. We call it our question box service, although we have a basket for our questions. And it's when we focus our time together on big questions and small ones too. We do this because we believe that every human conscience is a source of authority. We do this because we believe that life itself is a sacred text open for us to explore. We do this because we know that we gather to share awe at the mysteries at the heart of life. And we do this because we believe, as you use, that wrestling with questions is so much more fun than sitting with answers, and so much more what this life is about. We're gathered as a community of all ages today, and my eldest, Eleanor, asked me this morning, why are we doing an all-ages service today? And I told them it's because kids sometimes have the very best questions. And so we hope you children will ask us some of your very good questions today as well. So let us wonder, ponder, puzzle, query, and inquire together today. Come, let us gather, and let us join in singing our opening hymn, which is number 389 in your gray hymnal, gathered here in the mystery of this hour. We're going to sing it through once together all as one group, and then we're going to do a little round, if the band's good with it. We'll do a two-part round two times through after we sing it once all together. So I invite you to rise or remain seated as you're most comfortable and join us in song. We now light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, in the sustaining cup of community and the bright flame of the human spirit. As you are moved, I invite you to join me in our unison affirmation printed in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. I am Jamila Batchelder, the Director of Religious Education here. I am a 47-year-old white woman with lots of dark blonde hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a maroon, black, and cream striped knit top and a gray blazer. In her Where lecture to Unitarian Universalist in 2016, radio host Krista Tippett said the following: "A question is a mighty form of words. Here is how I've learned to experience it. Questions elicit answers in their likeness. Answers mirror the questions they rise or fall to meet. It is hard to resist a generous question. And we can all formulate questions that invite honesty, dignity, and revelation. There is something redemptive and life-giving about asking a better question. What are some of the questions that drive you? What are some of the questions that haunt you? What are some of the questions that delight you? I invite you now into a time of contemplation or pondering as you consider and formulate a generous or funny or worrisome or hopeful or easy or challenging question for our question basket. You can write several questions to a single slip of paper that you picked up. Save some papers because you're going to need some for later in the service. Later in the service, we will be responding to some of these questions together. First, Reverend Molly and I will reply to a few. Then we will be invited to respond to some with meditation or poetry or doodling. And then you'll be invited to grapple with some together in conversation. Don't worry too much if your question can be answered. In fact, we hope some of them cannot. And at the end of our time of wondering, we will share our ritual of stones and water, and you'll be invited to drop your questions into the question box on the same table with the water and stones, or if you're online, you can put them in the chat. So now let's take a moment to sit with questions.
And I invite you to continue with me in contemplation or prayer with the words of Erica Hewitt. Mystery of mysteries, we are thirsty for justice and bearing witness to so much grief. We are claiming our inherent wholeness and healing torn threads of the great web. We are hungry for liberation and cracking ourselves wide open. We are mourning the dead and fighting for the living. We are singing for joy and striving for meaning. We are embodying love, reaching out in love, acting on love's behalf, and letting that love wash over us, ebbing and flowing as it carries and holds us all. May we do it today and all over again when the new day comes, living that love together. And we'll conclude this time with a song that we sing quite frequently together. Singing with you is my prayer, that it is what we do together that is our prayer indeed. So I'm going to invite you to join in whenever you feel like you've got it down, or if you know this song, join in with me right away. It goes like this. Singing, singing with you, singing with you is my prayer. Laughing, laughing, laughing with you, laughing with you is my prayer. Crying, crying, crying with you, crying with you is my prayer. Listening, listening, listening with you, listening with you is my prayer. And wondering, wandering, wandering with you, wandering with you is my prayer. And singing one more time. Singing, singing with you, singing with you is my prayer. Amen. So we're gonna play with these questions now, and we've devised a three-part way of interacting. First, we've called receiving, for you in the congregation to receive some thoughts from Jamila and I. Then responding, a chance for you all to respond in the ways that you feel moved, perhaps with meditation or doodling or journaling. And then discussing, because we find the best truths together in our interaction with one another. So first, for the receiving part, Unitarian Universalists, we're not a very hierarchical people. We don't tend to think that the preacher up in front of the room has some grand knowledge that the rest of us don't have. We tend to think about all of us wrestling together. So why would you want to just hear from me about a question or hear from Jamila about a question? Well, I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and I grew up in a UU, religious education program, where I asked a lot of questions. Like, why are we here? What is the purpose of life? What happens to us after we die? And do you know what my religious educators responded to me? What do you think? And I said, I don't know what I think. That's why I'm asking. And Unitarian Universalists continue to ask, what do you think? Because we believe every person has wisdom. And we also believe that it's hard to start from nothing, especially as a child. And that sometimes we need some images or some ideas to be in dialogue with, to test ourselves against, and to build on a foundation from. And so we try in our religious education program not to give ready-made answers, but also not to give nothing at all to our children, but rather to give a beautiful image, a wondering that we have of our own accord, and a starting place for conversation. And then from there, we hope that we will all explore and wrestle together. And so as Jamila and I respond to a couple of the questions from the question box today, we know you're not going to take that as your authority, but that you're going to take it as your starting place, or as your continuing place. I like to say that what I think I'm doing when I preach is not giving some revelation, but is wrestling with the question in front of you. And that's what we're going to do today, very literally, is wrestle with a few questions in front of you, and then invite you into your own wrestling, because that's what we're about together. So, Jamila has been sorting through the questions and may have one or two.
There are so many good ones. I didn't know where to start. Well, I want to start with one I actually randomly know the answer to, but we might also explore this one in a more creative way next, is why is pink called pink? Here's the answer. So there are a type of scissors called pinking shears that cut a little jaggedy edge. And there's a flower that has a little jaggedy edge. So they decided to name them after the pinking shears. So the flowers are called pinks. And those flowers are often the shade of pink. And so the word pink comes from the flowers, which comes from the scissors. So now you know where pink comes from. Let's try something a little harder. What is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything?
42.
But what is the question? Do you know any good jokes? What's brown and sticky?
How did you? That was literally the joke that came into my head.
It's my go-to easy one.
A
Same
stick.
with- A stick! Okay, here's one I liked very much. And it has a name. If you put your name, should I share your name? Should I? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So this is from Harvey. Why do very unlikely things happen? Very, very and I asked this because some people know the story. I had a best friend growing up in California, my best friend, and then I moved away from California, and we lost touch and didn't speak for many years. And then I somehow found myself moving to Missouri, to Columbia, Missouri, and so did she. And we became best friends again. And I'm like, how did that possibly, I don't believe in an intervening God, and yet, holy moly, how did that happen? And I think my answer is there are an infinite possibility of things that could happen, and so sometimes the most unlikely things are going to be those possibilities that happen, and yet still, when they happen, you've got to pay a little attention to them. Because even if they happen totally randomly, by chance, they're a miracle. You have another answer?
I guess my answer would just be that we've learned that the universe changes in the direction of complexity, and that more and more complex things perhaps become more and more likely because complexity is what's becoming more and more likely. But that's one that I would maybe rather doodle about than try to answer.
Is that one too complicated and fraught? How about this one from your child?
All right, here's one from Eleanor Gordon. Why do people want power? That's a good one. I learned from the community organizers that I've worked with over many years that power is not a bad word, even though it becomes a bad word by how people abuse power. The definition that community organizers has given me of power is the capacity to affect your circumstance, or the capacity to have agency in your life. And so I think it's really natural and beautiful that people seek the power to live out the dreams for their lives that they have. There's a concept of power in the organizing world where people talk about what kind of power it is you have. Are you exercising power over, power with, or power from within? And the vision that community organizers have for a just and beautiful world is that we all have power with one another that allows for our power from within to come forth so that we may each have that agency and impact upon our lives. And sometimes our power is our voice, and we just need to scream it out. And that is an awesome way of exercising some power. And the problem with power becomes when it becomes hoarded, which seems to be the problem with any old thing, doesn't it? That it becomes a hindrance to the thriving of life when we try to tamp it down, control it, take as much of it as we can. Whereas with power, with resources, with love, when we let it flow and let it keep moving, that's when power and love and our resources can make beautiful things, because it's not getting hoarded away or crunched in or clutched to, but it's moving naturally between and from within us. So I don't think it's bad to want to have power in the sense of being able to enact change in your life. I think it's beautiful that when we can have power together with one another that is naturally flowing from within us.
I second what Molly said. I don't have anything to add to that one. Here's one that is a heavy one for me. Is unconditional love expected of us? And I will tell you a secret, one of my unpopular beliefs. I don't believe in unconditional love. I think that it is not expected of us, and that there can be things that can close the door for an individual. We can talk, I think everyone is worthy of love, but no one is required to be the one to give it to them. And that we as a culture can give care, but none of us, that there, even when I think about the people most beloved to me, I think that there are lines that could be crossed. And I feel like I'm the only person who believes this, so I feel very comfortable talking about this in front of you all, but that I think that it's a form of boundary setting and of care for ourselves to feel like we are never obligated to love any specific other person. We can hold the world and people in love, but that doesn't mean that we are required to unconditionally love. But let's hear from a theologian to say something a little more.
Well,
Yeah.
Do you think you can unconditionally love yourself? Is that what unconditional love is?
Lily's asking, can you unconditionally love yourself?
It's interesting, the feeling that I have toward myself, it's hard to call it love in the way that, like, to me, love is this relational thing. And I guess I am in a relationship with myself, but I am just with myself. I am stuck with myself forever. And, whatever this feeling is that we have, we're just a team. So I don't know if I even describe what I feel toward myself with the word love. And I feel like it's very profound what I have, the relationship I have with myself, but it's like, to me, love is this outward pulling thing. So,
yeah, I, as a theologian, will say, let's define our terms. What is love, and what is unconditionality? And I actually think that, like, wrestling with that question of what love is one of the core theological acts, especially for Unitarian Universalists who claim that love is at the center of our faith and of our community. Then our entire work together is saying, what does that mean? And I think that there are forms of that you might use the word love for, that is genuinely love, that can be life-denying instead of life-giving. And, that some people are driven by what is a core of love to really harmful actions. And can we still call that love when that's the result of it? That's a question to wrestle with. But where I come down as a pragmatist is that it matters how we love, and that trying to figure out how to love in a way that frees, in a way that yields thriving, in a way that yields power from within and power together, that is kind of the work of our lives. And so I think that kind of love that is like a how kind of approach, the word unconditional no longer applies, because we are always trying to find our way through the circumstances of our life and figure out what the loving thing is to the most people and to ourselves. And so the question then, to me, starts to fall apart about unconditional love, because what I'm doing is grappling with what a freeing love even is in the first place, and trying to, like, live my way into that question of what it is. And I will just add, with the question of unconditional love, that there's a wonderful thinker, activist named Prentice Hemphill, who does a lot of embodiment work and relationship work. And they talk about that boundaries are the distance at which I can love myself and you. And so I think we can say that we are we can be loving fully, If that means unconditionally, that's okay. We can be loving fully, but at a distance at which I can also love myself and the person that I'm loving at the same time.
I will throw out two more thoughts that Molly's talking made me think of. One is that I maybe do believe in unconditional care. And the other is that I feel like love is always a choice. So the phrasing of unconditional love takes away the choice. I think I do, whether I want to or not, unconditionally love many, maybe all people. But that each moment of doing so is a choice. And if I was to say I don't have that choice, it would make that loving feel abusive to me. And so that is what, because this aspect of choosing love is so important to my own theology, I have a discomfort with the phrasing of unconditional love.
Now, I'm going to say one more thing, too, and then we're going to be done. We're really just having a conversation, a question conversation. I think a lot about the phrase unconditional positive regard, which for me is in sitting with someone, no matter who they are or what they have done, sitting with that person with a deep belief in their humanity and in their capacity to change, to do good. And that is actually a challenge that I feel called to by Unitarian Universalism, which is a tradition rooted in the potential for goodness in humanity, a potential that's not always realized, and a potential that is sometimes smashed and disrespected by the way people behave, but a potential that is always there nonetheless. And so for me, I guess that might be what I think unconditional love is encountering any human person and believing deeply in their potential for goodness in a way that actually calls them to live into that. And that is not a boundaryless love, but perhaps it is unconditional in the sense of the possibility that we find to be deeply embedded in one another.
I would love to ask, not to totally go original with this, but the word compassion comes into my head as you were saying all of that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel like around how does compassion play in? Is that kind of what compassion is? That's how I think about compassion.
Yeah. So, yeah. Kylie is asking, is that compassion, or how does the word compassion come into play when we're thinking about this? Perhaps it's another one where we could spend our entire lives wrestling with the word together. I am an etymology dork, and the etymology of the word compassion is to suffer with. And so I think there is that sense that maybe a deep way of loving is truly coming alongside someone in all the suffering and complexity of life that as they're encountering it, and being deeply with people in that. And that seems like a pretty powerful definition of love to me. One that doesn't mean we have to change things, but that we can deeply accompany. So I would like to move on from this really powerful question in order to allow for some different ways of engaging as we continue on with one another. There are going to be 1 million questions that we don't get to today. They're all wonderful questions, and we're going to share some of them in our Facebook group, Columbia UUs, for you to continue to grapple with, and then we're going to share a few more in just a moment. So we're now going to invite you into a moment of response with a few questions. Knowing that part of the beauty for Unitarian Universalists of centering ourselves on questions is sometimes to let go of the idea of answers and to simply respond, to simply live our lives in response to questions that could never have only one answer. And so we're going to invite you, I hope you kept 1 or 2 of your cards. We're going to invite you into a moment of response in whatever way you are moved. We had a service a couple of years ago where we even invited people to dance in response to a question. If you feel moved, you're welcome, but we're trying to make this a little accessible today. So we're thinking perhaps you might like to meditate to a question. Perhaps you might like to journal or write in response on your card or on a notebook if you have one. Perhaps some poetry spills forth from you. Perhaps more questions are what comes out of you in response. Or perhaps you'd like to draw a picture or a doodle. However you feel moved to respond, we're going to give you a few of the questions you gave us that feel ripe for living rather than answering. And we're going to invite you to live them for a few moments together while Sam plays some quiet music. So, here are 3 questions for you. Where do we begin? Where do we end? And how can I learn to hold grief and joy at the same time, one in each hand? Where do we begin? Where do we end? How can I learn to hold grief and joy at the same time, one in each hand? We now invite your response. Thank you for that time of contemplation together. You can wrap it up or keep it going, because next we're going to invite you into conversation. And so if you are an introvert or internal processor who really just needs to keep journaling, that is absolutely fine. And if you're a person who feels open to it today, we gain so much truth by our interactions with one another. And so we're going to give you 3 more questions and invite you to turn to a neighbor, perhaps somebody you don't know, or perhaps someone you do, and see what kind of truth emerges between you in your conversation with one another. Jamila is going to say a word about what that process looks like.
So there is a Jewish sacred reading practice called Havruta, and it's where 2 religious scholars, neither of whom is the authority over the text or the authority over each other, they read it together, and then the questions begin. And they question each other, and they share their interpretations, and then they challenge each other to explore new interpretations, and they discuss together some more, and they let new questions arise, and then they discuss and discuss and discuss. My people like to talk. So there's an understanding that you have a piece of the truth, and I have a piece of the truth, and through this open exchange together, some alchemy occurs where your truth plus my truth equals something so much more than the sum of its parts, and that underneath that, there's an even bigger truth, a deeper truth. And that truth is that what we are forming together, this relationship of exploration and understanding and respect and trust and care, is bigger than the answer to any question. So now we'll turn to those questions that we explore together. Though this is not that moment for you, you can just think about it and save it for a time and a place and a person who you want to explore that question with. And then also, if you're online, you can discuss together in the chat, or you can talk to the person who's in the room with you if you have someone there, or you can wait and find that moment to talk about it later. So here is the question we want to give you to contemplate, and you can talk to the person next to you or make a small cluster and just try to really listen to each other and let new questions rise up and fumble together toward a greater understanding. So your first question, someone put that seems so profound. If I were someone else, would I know the difference? So what do you want to do with that question? Take a moment to talk about it together. If I were someone else, would I know the difference?
Should we maybe give them an option?
Oh, I'll give you a couple. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna give you. It's right. You're right.
So
I'm gonna give you a few.
Maybe write down the one that you want to talk
Yeah,
about.
I'll give you 3 to think about. Okay, here's another one. How do we reclaim faith as a force for justice in a public way? And the third one, when do I know I'm good enough? So I will read them through one more time. If I were someone else, would I know the difference? How do we reclaim faith as a force for justice in a public way? When do I know I'm good enough? And also, I have one that maybe I'm good enough, that maybe children might want to talk about is, why do kids need parents or caregivers? Why do we need them? Someone wrote that question, so. And they also wrote, I'll throw this in for you to think about with it. Why do we need a president?
Let's take about 3 minutes. We're going to take about 3 minutes to talk with one another. So we invite you into that together. Well, we know there's no way, there's just no way that we could give you enough time to chat about these questions. Thanks, Lily. We know there's no way that we could have possibly given you enough time to chat about these questions, but luckily, today is a potluck lunch Sunday. And so we hope that you will stay for lunch. We're actually going to pass out a bunch of these question cards among the tables so you can see some of the questions folks have written. Perhaps you'll keep talking about what you're already talking about, or maybe you'll want to talk about another question together. But this is how community is built, is by deepening into these questions together. It's how Unitarian Universalist community is built, and we invite you to stay for lunch and join us in that. But for now, let us begin to reach the conclusion of our service with hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. We're just going to sing verses 1 and 4 of hymn number 354 in your gray hymnal. I invite you to rise or remain seated as you are most comfortable today. We're going to enjoy one more offering from the band as we turn our hearts to the spiritual act of generosity, giving out of gratitude for the gifts of this life and recognizing all the good that we can accomplish when we work together. This morning's offering is for the work of our congregation. Please stay for our potluck lunch to discuss more questions. Please join us next week for our service on queer cultures of care with a very special musical guest. Please stay next week for our deep listening workshop at 3 o'clock next week. You can register at our website, uucomo.org, as we believe and practice deep listening as a revolutionary art in these times. And please take with you all the wonder of this community and carry it out into a world that needs more wonder. So take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the stakes are very high, the path is never clear. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Go in blessing and be a blessing to a world that needs our care, and let us sing our benediction. You may stand or remain seated as you're most comfortable. We have a custom of joining hands, but if touch is not for you, you can put your hands over your heart as we sing together our benediction.